The man drove slowly through the neighborhood, his tires crunching over the gravel road as the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky. He was tired from a long day, looking forward to the quiet of his home, to sitting with his wife on the porch and maybe sharing a meal. But as he turned onto his street, something immediately felt wrong. There was a crowd gathered near his driveway, neighbors standing in little clusters, some whispering to each other, others pretending to check their mail but clearly staring at the scene unfolding on his porch. His chest tightened as he pulled closer, and then he saw her, HOA Karen, standing with her back straight and her chin high, a stack of papers waving in her hand like a sword, her voice sharp and carrying across the yard. This property is in violation of community rules and bylaws. You've had warnings and now we're at the point of eviction. You are not permitted to stay here any longer. The man slammed his truck door and started toward the porch, his eyes fixed on his wife who stood facing Karen, her arms folded calmly, her expression steady though he could see the tension in her jaw. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't pleading, she was simply standing tall while Karen ranted at her. Karen's voice grew shriller as she waved the papers again. Here it is in writing, clear as day. You've violated parking regulations, noise ordinances, and even the landscaping codes. This is the third notice. You cannot live here anymore. The board has decided you need to leave immediately. The wife's eyes narrowed slightly but she remained silent. Her stillness only seemed to fuel Karen's anger. The neighbors whispered louder now, some shaking their heads, others enjoying the drama. The man climbed the porch steps and finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. What's going on here, Karen? Karen turned toward him with a smug smile, thrusting the papers into his face. What's going on is that your wife is being evicted. She's been nothing but trouble for this community, and I have the authority to remove her. The man took the papers slowly, scanning them with careful eyes. Most of the so-called violations were absurd. One claimed their grass had been 2 inches over regulation height. Another said they left their porch light on too late. One even accused his wife of disrespecting community representatives. He felt his blood boil but he kept his face calm. These are ridiculous, he said softly. You don't have the power to evict anyone. This is our home. Karen laughed harshly, tossing her head back. Oh, you think you're above the rules? You think because she smiles and stays quiet that she can get away with ignoring the standards everyone else follows? I've already told the board, and we voted. She has to go. The wife finally spoke, her voice low but clear. We both know your papers mean nothing, Karen. You don't have the right to order me out of my own house. Karen's eyes flashed with anger at the calm tone, her voice rising. Don't you dare talk back to me. You're nothing but a guest here, and guests who don't follow rules get removed. The man stepped closer, his body between Karen and his wife, his voice harder now. That's enough. You're not going to stand here and threaten her on our porch. Karen smirked and leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound menacing. She doesn't belong here, and everyone knows it. She needs to leave before things get worse. His fists tightened at his sides, but before he could speak his wife placed a gentle hand on his arm, her calm, steady presence pulling him back from anger. She looked Karen directly in the eyes, her own voice steady as stone. You've made your scene, you've shouted your lies, and you've humiliated yourself in front of the neighbors. Are you finished? Karen sputtered, her mouth opening and closing, her face red with rage. She turned to the crowd as if seeking their support. You all see how disrespectful she is. This is why we have to enforce the rules. If we let her stay it will ruin the entire neighborhood. But the murmurs among the neighbors were no longer in her favor. Some shook their heads, others whispered that she was going too far. The man felt the shift in the air. Karen didn't notice. She was too caught up in her performance. She shoved the papers back toward him and shouted, 48 hours, that's all she has, and if she's not gone I will personally see to it that this property is locked down. His wife didn't flinch, didn't even raise her voice. She simply stared at Karen with a look that made the woman hesitate for the first time. The man folded the papers slowly, his eyes never leaving Karen's, his voice calm but laced with steel. You're making a mistake, and you'll regret this. Karen laughed. Again, but her laughter rang hollow now, forced and too loud. She snapped back, we'll see who regrets what. Then she turned sharply on her heel and marched down the porch steps, the crowd parting awkwardly as she passed, her heels clicking hard against the walkway. The neighbors dispersed quietly, some avoiding his eyes, others giving small nods of support. The man slipped an arm around his wife's shoulders as they stood on the porch together, the papers crumpled in his fist. The evening air, heavy with the weight of what had just happened, He looked at her and whispered, "She won't get away with this." His wife gave the smallest smile, calm and certain. "I know, let her play her game, it won't last long." Her calmness settled his heart. But the storm had only just begun, and deep inside he knew Karen had picked the wrong family to push. The next morning the man stepped onto his porch and immediately sensed the tension in the air. Neighbors were gathering again near the sidewalk. Small groups whispering and pointing, and at the center of it all was Karen, standing tall with her clipboard in hand, her voice sharp and cutting through the chatter. She had chosen this time when most people were home to stage her little show. She waved her papers high like banners of victory. Her lips curled into a smug smile as she declared, "This neighborhood has rules, and rules are not optional. Some people think they can ignore them. But I am here to remind everyone what happens when the board decides someone no longer belongs." She turned deliberately, her finger stabbing toward the man's house. "This family has brought nothing but violations, noise, and disrespect, and I will not stand by while our community is dragged down." The man's wife stood at the top of the porch steps, calm and silent, her hands resting at her sides. She didn't flinch at the accusations. Her stillness only seemed to agitate Karen more. The man joined his wife, standing beside her, his jaw tight, but his expression unreadable. Karen's voice rose louder, making sure everyone could hear. "You can see it for yourselves, neighbors. Their grass was too long, their lights on past midnight, their vehicles parked in the wrong place, and let us not forget her rude behavior at meetings. She thinks she's above all of us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some frowned, others shifted uncomfortably, no one spoke up, but their hesitation was clear. Karen mistook their silence for support and pressed on. "The board has already decided, eviction is the only solution. This community deserves better than freeloaders who refuse to respect our standards." She sneered at the wife as if expecting her to cry or lash out, but the woman simply looked at her with calm eyes, the kind of look that made Karen falter for half a second before doubling down. "And if she refuses to leave, there will be fines, liens, and court orders until she learns her place," Karen shouted, slapping her clipboard against her palm for emphasis. The man clenched his fists, but his wife's calm presence stopped him from speaking too soon. Instead she stepped forward, her voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You've spoken loudly, Karen, but you haven't spoken truth." Her words cut through the air like a blade. The neighbors shifted, their eyes darting between the two women. Karen flushed red and snapped back, "Don't twist this. You've broken rules and everyone knows it. You're nothing but a guest here and guests leave when they're told." The wife tilted her head slightly, her calmness rattling Karen further. "Is that so? Then why don't you show them the real reason you're here? Why don't you admit this is about power and not rules?" Karen sputtered, her mouth opening and closing. The neighbors whispered louder now, doubt creeping into their eyes. The man finally spoke, his voice steady. "You've embarrassed yourself enough, Karen. You've made your accusations. But when the truth comes out, everyone will see who really doesn't belong here." Karen's face twisted with fury, her voice shrill as she shouted, "Mark my words, she'll be gone, and when she is, you'll all thank me for protecting this neighborhood." But the neighbors didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they only stood in uneasy silence, some shaking their heads as Karen stormed off, clutching her clipboard like a shield. The man and his wife stayed on their porch, calm and steady, their silence more powerful than any argument. And though Karen walked away with her head high, her show of power had left cracks in her image, cracks that were only going to widen. Karen returned later that evening. As if the morning's drama hadn't been enough, she marched straight up the walkway with her clipboard under her arm, her heels clicking loudly on the pavement. Neighbors once again peeked through curtains and gathered in small groups at a safe distance. They had seen the spectacle earlier and now they were curious if Karen would actually push things further. The man stood just inside the doorway watching her approach, his wife beside him, calm and steady. Karen didn't even knock, she simply planted herself on the porch, her voice already raised. "I'm not finished with you. I gave you your warning and yet you're still here acting like you have the right to ignore this community." She flipped through her papers dramatically, her eyes narrowing on the wife. "You think silence will protect you? You think standing there and staring at me makes you stronger? No, it makes you guilty, it makes you arrogant, and it proves you have no respect for authority." The wife didn't move, didn't speak, her expression calm as if Karen's words were nothing more than wind rushing past. The man could see the way Karen's face tightened at the lack of reaction, her voice rising higher, shriller. "Say something, Defend yourself, admit you've broken the rules, because your silence is all the proof I need that you don't belong here. But still the wife remained still. Her eyes fixed on Karen with quiet composure, her hands clasped in front of her. The more she said nothing, the more Karen unraveled. Karen stomped her foot on the porch, her clipboard rattling in her hands. Do you think you're better than me? Do you think these people will side with you just because you stand there pretending you're innocent? You're nothing, nothing without this man standing beside you. Her finger jabbed toward the husband, her voice dripping with contempt. And when I'm done, both of you will be forced out. Still the wife didn't answer, her silence cutting deeper than any insult could. The neighbors whispered nervously, some shaking their heads. One older woman muttered softly, "She's not even arguing, and Karen looks worse every second." Karen whipped her head toward the crowd, shouting, "Don't listen to her. Games, she's manipulating you with silence, with smugness, but I see through it, I won't let her win." Her chest heaved as she glared back at the wife. But those calm eyes didn't waver, and for the first time Karen's words began to falter, her voice cracking slightly, her confidence slipping. The man finally stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Maybe you should listen to yourself, Karen. She hasn't said a word and yet somehow you're the one losing control." Karen's face flushed deep red. She sputtered, I'm not losing control, I'm enforcing the rules." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She turned on her heel, shouting over her shoulder as she stormed off the porch. "You can't hide behind silence forever, I'll make sure of it." The crowd slowly dispersed, some shaking their heads, others whispering that Karen had gone too far. The man looked at his wife, her calm composure unbroken, and he realized that her silence had spoken louder than any argument could. Karen wanted chaos and shouting, but what she got instead was a mirror reflecting her own anger back at her, and that mirror was starting to crack. The next day Karen returned yet again. But this time she came prepared for a bigger show. She stood in front of the man's house with her clipboard thick with papers. Neighbors slowly gathered as they always did, curious about the drama. Karen's eyes glittered with triumph as she began reading loudly. "Here are the documented violations that prove this family has broken. Community rules, number 1, failure to maintain proper lawn height. Grass measured at 3 inches above the allowed standard. Number 2, porch light left on past curfew hours, disturbing neighborhood peace. Number 3, unauthorized guest vehicles parked overnight. Number 4, unapproved decorations placed on the property. Number 5, verbal disrespect toward community leadership. And number 6, illegal residency of a spouse without proper approval from the board." She snapped each paper. As she read, waving them like weapons, her voice carrying down the street. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some frowning, some whispering. The man stood on the porch with his wife beside him, watching silently as Karen theatrically flipped each page. "You see," Karen shouted, "this isn't personal. This is about rules. They have broken every one of them, and if we don't act, our community will collapse into chaos. We cannot allow lawbreakers to live among us unchecked." Her voice was shrill, trembling with too much energy, her eyes flicking between the neighbors as if begging them to nod and clap. But the crowd stayed quiet. One man muttered under his breath, "Grass? Lights? That's all she has?" Another neighbor whispered, "I've seen her make stuff up before. This doesn't sound right." Karen raised her clipboard higher, her voice desperate now. "Don't you see? These papers are proof. These fines are real. These violations cannot be ignored, and if they refuse to leave, we will take them to court and win." She pointed a finger at the wife, her tone dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here, you've never belonged here, and this is the evidence that will prove it." The wife's calm eyes never wavered. She didn't move, she didn't speak, she simply looked at Karen with quiet strength, her silence louder than any denial could be. The man finally stepped forward, his voice low and even. "Those papers are nothing but lies you typed up yourself. Half of them are laughable, and the rest are fabricated. You know it, and deep down everyone here knows it too." Karen's face flushed crimson. Her hands shook as she clutched her clipboard tighter. "No, these are official, they are binding, and they will stand in court." But her voice cracked at the edges, betraying her panic. The neighbors whispered louder now, doubt spreading, some shaking their heads, others crossing their arms, unimpressed. Karen tried again, waving the papers desperately. "This is my duty as HOA president. I won't let disrespect and fraud poison this neighborhood." But her words rang hollow in the heavy air. The man stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. Keep waving your fake charges, Karen. The more you speak, the more everyone sees the truth. Karen's jaw clenched, her lips trembling as if she wanted to scream. She snapped her clipboard shut with a loud crack and spun. On her heel, stomping down the sidewalk, the neighbors parted silently, their faces cold, their eyes filled with judgment not for the couple but for her. The man and his wife stood quietly on their porch, unshaken, watching her retreat. And though Karen had tried to bury them under fake charges, all she had managed to do was bury her own credibility deeper. That evening Karen returned for the 5th time in as many days. As if the embarrassment from her fake charges wasn't enough, she came back. Fueled by pure spite, her clipboard clutched under her arm like a weapon, and her voice sharp before she even stepped onto the porch. Enough of this nonsense, enough of your games. You think you can hide behind silence and smirks, but the truth is clear, your wife doesn't belong here. She is nothing but a stain on this community. The man was already outside on the porch with his wife, standing steady, watching her approach with cold eyes. Neighbors gathered again, some curious, some weary, many just waiting for the next explosion. Karen planted herself at the bottom of the steps, pointing directly at the wife. You need to leave, right now. You don't deserve this house. You don't deserve to live among people who actually follow the rules. You've broken every standard we have, and no one wants you here. Her voice grew shriller as she noticed the crowd wasn't reacting. She turned her fury on the husband, her finger stabbing toward him. And you let this happen. You let her drag you down. Everyone here knows you're weak, hiding behind her silence, pretending you're strong. But the truth is you can't control your own house. You can't even control her. A few gasps rose from the crowd, not at the couple but at Karen's venom. The man clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw tightening, his chest rising with anger. But before he could step forward, his wife touched his arm gently, her calm presence grounding him. She stepped down one step closer to Karen, her face composed, her voice steady and quiet. Are you finished? Karen's face twisted, her voice cracking as she shouted. Finished? No, I've only begun. You are a fraud, a liar, and a parasite in this neighborhood, and I swear I will see you thrown out on the street. The wife tilted her head slightly, her calm eyes cutting sharper than any shout. You've said everything you can say, and still you have nothing real, only insults and lies. The louder you scream, the more everyone sees you for what you are. The crowd stirred, whispers spreading, a neighbor muttered. She's right, Karen just yells and yells, but never proves anything. Another whispered back, it's embarrassing at this point. Karen heard the whispers and her face burned red. She raised her voice even higher, trying to drown them out. You fools, don't let her trick you. She's dangerous, she doesn't deserve your respect, she doesn't even deserve to stand on this porch. She turned back to the wife, her voice dripping with mockery. Why don't you just pack your things and go? You don't belong here, and nothing you say will change that. The wife didn't blink, didn't move, she just let the silence stretch long and heavy, her calm gaze locking Karen in place until the woman finally broke, stomping her foot like a child and snapping, You'll regret this, both of you will regret it. She spun around sharply, marching away as the neighbors shook their heads, some crossing their arms in disapproval, others whispering that Karen had lost her mind. The man turned to his wife, his anger still hot but his voice soft. She's going too far, she won't stop. His wife's calm expression didn't change, her voice low but certain. She's burning herself out, every word she throws makes her weaker, we just have to wait, and when the moment comes, she'll regret everything. The man looked into her eyes and felt the certainty in her calmness. The tide was turning, and even Karen didn't realize it yet. The next afternoon Karen returned again, her obsession now plain for everyone to see. She marched straight to the porch, her face twisted with determination. The clipboard clutched tight against her chest. Neighbors gathered quickly, some shaking their heads as if they were watching a storm they couldn't stop. The man stood with his wife at the doorway, waiting, his jaw tense, his eyes fixed on Karen as she stopped at the bottom of the steps, her voice loud and sharp. This ends today. I will not tolerate this defiance any longer. You think you can ignore me. You think your silence makes you clever. But I will break through it, and when I do you'll be gone from this neighborhood forever. Her words hung heavy in the air, but the wife didn't stay silent this time. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes calm but cold, her voice even and steady. Karen, are you absolutely sure you want to keep going down this path? The crowd hushed instantly, shocked at the wife finally speaking after Days of silence, Karen sneered, mistaking the calm tone for weakness. Of course I am sure. This is my duty. I am protecting this community from liars like you. I won't stop until you are thrown out, until everyone sees you for what you are. The wife nodded slightly, her gaze never breaking. You've shouted, you've threatened. You've made a fool of yourself, and still you've proven nothing. All you've shown this neighborhood is who you really are. Karen's eyes widened slightly, taken aback by the measured response, but she quickly recovered, her voice rising again. Don't act like you can intimidate me with your calm act. You're nothing here, you don't belong, and no matter what words you throw at me, the board's decision stands. You will be removed. Do you hear me? Removed. The wife took another step down the stairs, her presence steady and commanding. You keep saying I don't belong, but you've never once explained why. Is it because of fake violations, because of your lies, or because you simply cannot stand that you don't control me? The neighbors stirred, whispers growing louder. Some nodding in agreement. Karen's face reddened as she waved her clipboard frantically. Because you break every rule, because you show no respect, because you're nothing but trouble, and I have the authority to deal with you. The wife's calm expression didn't falter, her voice firm now. No, Karen, you don't have authority. You only have arrogance, and arrogance has blinded you. You've forgotten that truth doesn't need shouting, it only needs proof. Her words cut deep. The crowd fell silent. All eyes on Karen now, waiting for her answer, but for the first time her mouth opened and no words came out. She fumbled with her papers, trying to hide her trembling hands. The man stepped closer to his wife, his voice low but strong. I warned you, Karen. You're making a mistake you won't be able to take back. Karen's eyes darted nervously, her voice cracking as she forced out, I will not be intimidated, I will finish what I started. She tried to turn her glare back at the wife, but the calm, steady eyes staring into hers made her falter. The wife leaned in slightly, her words quiet but sharp enough for everyone to hear. Then be ready, Karen, because the next move isn't yours, it's mine. The silence that followed was heavy, neighbors exchanging looks. Realizing the storm was about to break, Karen stepped back a pace, suddenly unsure, but her pride forced her to hold her ground, her lips pressed into a thin line. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with whispers, everyone sensing that something was about to happen. Something that would end this feud once and for all. The man and his wife returned inside, their calm unbroken. But in the air lingered a quiet anticipation. The feeling that Karen had finally pushed too far, and soon she would see consequences she never imagined. The following day the air was heavy with tension, as if the whole neighborhood waited for another clash, and true to their expectations Karen showed up again. This time more dramatic than ever. She wore a sharp blazer as though she was marching into a courtroom, her clipboard stuffed with papers she pretended were official. She stood at the bottom of the porch steps and shouted for everyone to hear. This is the final warning. If she does not leave today, the HOA will take full action. No one is above the rules, and certainly not her. Neighbors gathered quickly, whispering among themselves, some rolling their eyes, others curious to see what would happen. The man stood with his wife at the top of the porch, his face cold. But it was his wife who slowly stepped forward, her eyes steady, her voice calm but commanding. Karen, you've pushed long enough, and now I'll give you one last chance to stop before you humiliate yourself further. Karen laughed harshly. Humiliate myself? No, you're the one who will be humiliated when the sheriff arrives to escort you out. I warned you and you ignored me. Now you'll pay the price. She pointed her finger dramatically toward the wife, her voice echoing down the street. You don't belong here, you never have, and I will personally see to it that you're thrown out for good. The wife's calmness did not break. Instead she reached into her pocket and slowly pulled out her wallet. The crowd grew quieter, eyes fixed on her. Karen sneered. What now? Another excuse? Another trick? Nothing you pull out will change what's about to happen. The wife flipped the wallet open and held it up for all to see. The sunlight caught the shiny badge inside, a clear and unmistakable military ID. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Neighbors leaned closer, some covering their mouths, others nodding with sudden respect. Karen froze mid-sentence, her smug grin collapsing as her eyes locked on the badge. Her voice cracked. What is that? The wife's tone was calm but sharp as a blade. This is who I am. This is what you've been trying to throw out of this neighborhood. A woman who has served her country. A woman who has earned the right to stand wherever she chooses, and you dare wave fake papers in my face. Karen stumbled back a step, her mouth opening and closing, her clipboard trembling in her hands. The neighbors began murmuring loudly, words like military. She served. Karen's finished drifting through the air. The man placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, his pride shining through his stern face. Karen tried to recover, her voice shrill. This doesn't change the violations. Rules are rules, and military or not, she still has to go. But her voice was hollow now, drowned out by the shifting crowd. One neighbor called out, "She's got more authority than you'll ever have, Karen." Another said, "You can't bully her, not after seeing that." Karen's face turned pale, her hands shaking as she clutched her clipboard like a shield. The wife lowered the badge slightly, but her eyes remained locked on Karen, her voice steady and powerful. "Your lies end here, Karen. The neighbors see the truth, and now so do you. This is the last time you'll ever try to intimidate me." The crowd erupted in whispers, some even clapping lightly. Karen stood frozen, stripped of her power, her reputation unraveling in front of everyone. The moment was no longer hers. The man and his wife had taken it back, and with one simple reveal, everything had changed. Karen stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, her mouth slightly open, her face pale as whispers rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who once stayed silent now spoke loudly, their words cutting deeper than any argument. "She serves the country," and Karen tried to evict her. One man muttered, another woman shook her head and said louder, "Shameful, absolutely shameful, harassing someone who wears a badge." Karen's hands shook as she clutched her clipboard tighter, trying to regain control, her voice cracking as she shouted. This doesn't excuse breaking rules, it doesn't give her special privileges, military or not. She still. But she was cut off by a firm voice from the crowd. "No, Karen, you crossed the line, you lied, you bullied, and now we all see it." Heads nodded, arms crossed, the atmosphere shifting against her. Karen's eyes darted desperately from one face to another, searching for support but finding none. The same neighbors who once nodded along with her rants now stared back with disappointment, some even glaring with disgust. The man stood beside his wife, his presence steady and strong, but it was the wife who spoke, her voice calm yet commanding. "These neighbors you claim to represent, they are the ones now rejecting you. Karen, your lies have no place here, and neither does your abuse of power." Karen's lips trembled, her bravado slipping. I only wanted to protect this community," she stammered, but her words sounded weak and pitiful. The wife's eyes remained steady. "Protecting a community means serving it with honesty, not tearing it apart with arrogance." The neighbors began clapping softly, the sound spreading like a wave, their eyes on the wife, their respect plain to see. Karen's face burned with humiliation as the applause grew louder. Her clipboard slipped slightly in her sweaty grip, the very symbol of her so-called authority now useless. A neighbor from the back shouted, "Step down, Karen, you're finished here." Another added, "We don't need an HOA run on fear and lies." Karen's chest heaved as she tried to speak, but no words came. The authority she once carried with her shrill voice and constant threats was gone, crumbled in the face of truth and unity. The wife took one final step closer, her words soft but sharp. "It's over, Karen. You lost the moment you chose lies over respect. You can't take back what you've done, and you can't silence the truth anymore." Karen stumbled backward, nearly tripping as the neighbors closed ranks, their eyes no longer fearful but firm. She turned and rushed down the street, her clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield, the sound of the neighbors' disapproval following her. The man slipped an arm around his wife's shoulders as they watched her retreat, the sun casting long shadows across the street. The neighbors lingered, some walking up to the porch to thank them, others simply nodding with respect. The power Karen had once held was shattered beyond repair, and the couple stood united, stronger than ever, while the neighborhood finally saw Karen for what she truly was. The neighborhood felt different after that day, as if a heavy shadow had finally lifted. The whispers about Karen spread from porch to porch, and by the next HOA meeting half the board members had already distanced themselves from her. They knew the damage was done. No one wanted to be tied to her humiliation. The neighbors who once avoided eye contact with the man and his wife now greeted them with nods and smiles. Some even stopped to say, "We're sorry we didn't speak sooner." The man accepted their words with quiet dignity. His wife simply smiled, calm as always. But inside the victory was clear. Karen's power was gone. The clipboard she once brandished like a sword had become a symbol of her downfall. At the meeting she tried to speak, her voice trembling as she claimed she only wanted fairness, but the room was cold and unkind. One board member said bluntly. Fairness doesn't mean lying and harassing our own neighbors, especially a woman who served her country. Another added, you've embarrassed all of us, Karen, we can't support you anymore. Her face turned pale, her hands shook. She tried to argue but her words fell flat. By the end of the night she was removed from her position. Her reputation in tatters. The man and his wife didn't even need to attend. The neighbors carried the truth forward for them. When the news reached them, the man sat back on the porch with a deep breath, relief in his chest. His wife beside him with her calm smile. It's over now, he whispered. She nodded. Yes, and it ended the way it should, with truth louder than lies. Karen hid away in her house after that. The blinds always closed. The confident woman who once strutted through the neighborhood now reduced to a figure of shame. No one listened to her threats anymore. No one feared her anymore. Children played freely without her scolding. Neighbors gathered without her interruptions. The street felt alive again. One evening as the sun set, painting the sky orange and gold, the man stood at the edge of his porch, looking over the yard that had become a battlefield of words and lies, now quiet and peaceful. His wife joined him, her arm brushing against his, her badge tucked safely away but its presence still echoing in everyone's mind. It wasn't the badge alone that had ended it. It was her strength, her calm, her refusal to break under the storm. He smiled faintly, pride swelling in his chest. You didn't even raise your voice, and you won, she chuckled softly. Sometimes silence is the loudest weapon of all. Together they sat in the fading light, their home safe, their respect stronger than ever, while Karen's voice, once so loud, had finally been silenced forever.